Our call to worship this morning comes from my colleague Nancy Schaefer. Kate is teaching the kids about dinosaur air. That air you breathe, she says, that air you have inside of you, every time you take a breath, that's dinosaur air, she says. Dinosaurs breathed it. And the kids' eyes are open really wide, and they take giant gulps of air just to have more dinosaur air inside of them. The air that we have is all the air we will ever have, Kate says. So we have to take good care of it. The kids gulp a little less, but consider the air already inside of them. And Kate tells more. Actually, we're all cousins. The kids look at each other, disbelieving, then believing. You? We, all of us, Kate says, way, way back, began as cousins. Way back in the beginning. And the kids whoop and they clap each other on the backs, and for the rest of the day, they savor the air and they call each other cousin. Let each of us, in like spirit, savor our dinosaur air and call each other cousin as we come together in worship this morning to be reminded of the interdependence of all life on our beautiful blue planet. And so I invite you now to sing one of our favorite hymns, Blue Boat Home. So please rise in body and spirit.
This story comes from the stories of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. It's called The Legend of the Fisher King. Percival, a popular knight in the court of King Arthur, was out on a quest. He found himself riding for days through a strange and devastated region, a wasteland where nothing grew. While he was searching for food and shelter, he came to a lake. And there he saw two figures from a boat, one of them dressed in royal garments. "Where can I find lodging?" Percival called out. The regally dressed fellow, who was the Fisher King, invited him to stay at his castle nearby and gave him directions. Before long, Percival found himself at the great castle of the Fisher King. Welcomed by courtiers, Percival was escorted into the hall where a ceremonial banquet was taking place. And there, on a kind of a hammock bed, lay the king, who appeared to be in great pain from a wound. Now the king was the victim of a spell that had stopped his wound from healing. This spell had taken from the ruler and his lands the power of regeneration. So this was the cause of the wasteland and the king's wound. Yet, as the evening wore on, no one at the court had mentioned the horror they faced. It was known to them, however, that the spell might be broken if a knight appeared and asked the king a compassionate question. But Percival had been brought up to believe that it was rude, even out of order, to ask questions of people in authority. So even though he approached the king to greet him, and he could smell that stench of an open wound, he acted as if nothing was wrong. He greeted the king, enjoyed his dinner, and laid down to rest. The next morning, Percival awoke to find the king, the courtiers, and the entire castle had disappeared. So he set off, eventually finding his way out of the wasteland and back to King Arthur's court. A feast was held to mark his return, this much-admired knight. All was a celebration until there was an interruption by the dramatic entrance of a hideous but wise witch called Kundry. She publicly scolded Percival for lacking the compassion to ask about the suffering of the Fisher King and his people. "You call yourself a knight?" Kundry cried. Look at you. You didn't even have the guts to ask what was going on with the king. In fact, Parsifal had been worried about this very thing. Haunted by Kundry's accusation and his own feelings of failure, Parsifal fell into a depression. He finally realized he had to return to the court of the Fisher King. It took many years and many adventures to find the mysterious castle again, but he kept exploring, and eventually he found the Fisher King in an even greater state of suffering than the last time he had been there. This time, Parsifal strode right up to the king and knelt before him. "My lord, what is ailing you?" he asked. That Parsifal cared enough to ask this question had an immediate and powerful effect. Color returned to the cheeks of the king. He rose from his couch, his health regained. In the same moment, the wasteland began once again to bloom. The spell was broken by one compassionate question.
Our meditation today takes the form of a guided meditation, so I invite you to get comfortable. The sermon today, the service is sort of centered around Earth Day and our planet. But as I told you back in the fall, that I'm very aware that there's a degree of grief that we carry in a deep place in us because of all that's happening with our planet at the time. And this guided meditation is a tool to be able to take in what the world gives us, but then also to let it go, And it's called breathing through, and it comes out of an ancient Buddhist meditation. So close your eyes and focus on your breathing. Don't try to breathe in any special way. Just watch the breathing as it happens, in and out. As you watch your breathing, note that it happens by itself, without your will, without your deciding each time to inhale and exhale. It's as though you're being breathed by life. Just as everyone in this room, in this city, on this planet now, is being breathed by life, sustained in our vast, living, breathing web. Now visualize your breath as a stream or a ribbon of air. Actually see it flow up through your nose, down through your windpipe, and into your lungs. Now take it through your heart. Picture it flowing through your heart, and then from your heart out through an opening to reconnect with the larger web of life. Let this breath stream as it passes through you and through your heart appear as one loop within that vast web, connecting you with it. Now open yourself, open your awareness to the suffering of the world. For now, if you can, drop all of your defenses and open to your knowledge of the suffering. Let it come to you as concretely as you can. Images of your fellow beings in pain and need, in fear and isolation, in prisons, hospitals, tenements, refugee camps. Relax. Let these images surface, the countless hardships of our fellow human beings, and of our animal brothers and sisters as well, as they swim the seas and fly the air of our planet. Now breathe in that pain and the suffering like granules of sand on the stream of air up through your nose, down through your trachea, lungs, and heart, and then out again into the world. You're asked to do nothing for now. Just let this pass through your heart. Be sure that stream flows through your heart and out again. Don't hang on to the pain. Surrender it for now to the healing resources of life's vast web. If no images or feelings arise and there's only blankness, gray and numb, breathe that through. The numbness itself is a very real part of our world. And if what surfaces for you is not so much pain for others, as much as the losses and hurts in your own life, breathe those through too. Your own difficulties are an integral part of the grief in our world, and rise with it. Should you fear that with this pain your heart might break, remember that the heart that breaks open holds the whole universe. Your heart is that large. Trust it. Keep breathing through. And I invite you to try this practice for a short time of meditation today. Last November, I gave a sermon about living in this time of climate change, and it's called A Larger View of Time. It was toward the end of November. If you want to go back after today and listen to that, you're welcome to. But in that sermon, I talked about our generation, those of us living on the earth right now, as having the distinction of being the only generation of people to truly hold the fate of human life and of the multiple forms of plant and animal life on our planet in our hands. It's hard to face this pivotal psychological reality of our times. But if we are to survive and indeed thrive, we need to not just face the reality, but also try to find a way to embrace it, as difficult as it might be. And the temptation might be to try to avoid it because it's just too overwhelming to talk about. But there is no escape. It surrounds us and lives deep in our being. The real danger lies in not talking about it, not facing up to the challenges and despair, as well as acknowledging the joy and the hopefulness that are also part of living in this time. What we need is active hope, not hope as a state of being, but hope as the way that we live our lives. In my previous sermon, I spoke of the stories of our time, with all three stories unfolding simultaneously. There's the story of business as usual, which is pretty much as it sounds. We just continue the way things are, seeing little need to change the way that we live. And then there's the second story, which is called The Great Unraveling, which tells of economic decline, resource depletion, climate change, social division and war, mass extinction of species, the heaviness, the unraveling. And then there's the third story, The Great Turning, which is the story based on the understanding that our society right now is in a time of transformation and transition, including people's relationships with one another and with our earth. And although that we're in fact living all three of these stories simultaneously, we can choose which story will receive our attention and our energy. And at least for me, I choose the constructive energy, of the great turning. And today we explore how each of us is called to live in this extraordinary time. One of the big questions in the climate change debate: are humans smarter than frogs in a pot? If you put a frog in a pot, so that it goes, and slowly turn up the heat, it won't jump out. Instead, it'll enjoy the nice warm bath until it's cooked to death. We humans seem to be doing pretty much the same thing, but there is another way, a call to wake up and jump out of the metaphorical pot and be part of the great turning. So the 4 steps or stages, which I'm going to outline for you in the next few minutes, seek to give us real and tangible ways that we can help to heal our broken world, and are to some extent drawn from the work of Chris Johnstone and Joanna Macy. First step: come from a spiritual center of gratitude. Our faith must inform how we move in this new world and this reality. By living in a center of gratitude, we become empowered by hope and courage, with deep gratitude for our lives and for our earth. When we come from this ongoing place of gratitude, we are more present every moment to the wonder of being alive in this amazing world, to the many gifts that we receive, and to the beauty that surrounds us. We give thanks for this precious day. George Santayana writes, "The world is not respectable. It is mortal, tormented, confused, deluded forever, but it is shot through with beauty, with love, with glints of courage and laughter, and in these the Spirit blooms." So in this first step, we ground ourselves in gratitude for the myriad of the positive and beautiful parts of life. Yet this very step that calls us to pay attention to what we love and value in the world has the potential to bring with it a growing awareness of the unraveling parts of the world that we do love and cherish. And so this leads to the second step, which is actually naming and honoring our pain. The story that Jan told us earlier of the knight Parsifal is a story of great suffering that is not acknowledged, and the people carried on as though nothing was wrong. And although that story was written over 800 years ago, it is the story of our time. There are many reasons why the question, "What troubles you?" in terms of our planet does not get asked, and why we, like Parsifal, the first time he visits the Fisher King, go along with the pretense that all is well, even when we know that it isn't. This is the business as usual story. So if we come to the second step of honoring our pain from a center of gratitude, then we face this step with a resilience and a psychological buoyancy that can help sustain us as we honor the pain of the world as it's manifested in both ourselves and in others. Honor in this step means that although it's not easy, we recognize the value of this step. Our pain for the world is like pain in our own body. It alerts us to the fact that something's wrong and needs to be attended to. It also reveals our compassion and understanding of ourselves as part of the web of life. It is in this stage that we need to educate ourselves. Sitting with the reality of destruction and loss that we currently find ourselves in is important so that we can then move on with knowledge and commitment and awareness. Such learning about these environmental issues need to connect to our daily lives and help us also understand the realities of those who are already suffering the effects of environmental destruction. This step of naming and honoring our pain is a tough one. We can be caught between two fears: the fear of what will happen if we as a society continue the way that we're going, and the fear that acknowledging just how bad things really are because of the potential despair that it could bring up. So we need to understand that pain for our world is normal, and it's a healthy response. It's a healthy reaction to a world in trauma as we feel this compassion, this suffering with our earth. This step involves facing the truth of all that's happening with our earth, voicing that pain and realizing that we're not alone, that the pain is not endless. We understand ourselves to be part of the interexistence with all life. The great Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh has said, "What we most need to do to save our world is to hear within us the sounds of the earth crying." When we hear these sounds, we know ourselves to be ultimately connected to the earth and all others, which connects us to sources of strength and resilience as old as and enduring as life itself. When you feel the pain, remember the breathing through meditation that we did earlier. It is a good tool. And this leads us to the third step, which is seeing with new eyes. In the second step, we've grown to understand our pain for the world as a healthy expression of our belonging to life and to the earth, and not something to be avoided at all costs. In the third step, we find resources and a new view both of what is possible and of our own power to make a difference. We might experience a widening of our sense of self and a different understanding of power as being a power with rather than a power over, and a move away from this being a zero-sum game. There is a Danish folktale told of a meeting between two kings. "You see that tower?" said the first king, pointing to a tall and highly fortified tower in the distance. "In my kingdom, I can command any of my subjects to climb to the top and then jump to their deaths. Such is my power that all will obey." Now the second king, who was visiting, looked around him, and then he pointed to the door of a humble house that was nearby. And he said, "In my kingdom, I can knock at the door of a house like that in any town or village, and I will be welcomed. Such is my power that I can stay overnight, sleeping well, without any fear of my safety." So the first king had power over, second king had power with. This concept of shared vision, shared journeys, leads to an enriched and relational understanding of community, which is absolutely vital in the Great Turning. In fact, when Bill McKibben, who's the head of 350.org, is asked where people should move to be safe from climate change, he always tells them, any place with a strong community. Neighbors were optional in the past 50 years, but they will be essential in the decades to come. Community includes places like this faith community where we are at home. Groups such as Transition US and the Next System Project are supporting building communities and economic systems that will be more resilient in this time of change as we discover again that we need to learn to live together or we will not live at all. So we need to develop a larger view of time also. the concept of seeing ourselves as but a brief moment in this long stream of planetary time and human history, and it enriches us by seeing our ancestors as our allies and thinking of ourselves as the ancestors to future generations. The fourth and last step involved in living and thriving in this time of climate change involves, of course, taking action, going forth with a vision. There's a saying that important change goes through 3 steps. First, it's regarded as a joke. Then it's treated as a threat. And finally, it's accepted as normal. So to act means that we have to have a vision of the future that we believe is possible. Ask yourself this question. If you knew you could not fail, what would you most want to do for the healing of our world? If you knew you could not fail. And then think about doing it. As the problems continue to worsen, our inability to look at things as they are prevents us from envisioning alternate possibilities, and our inaction leads us to this even greater sense of being overwhelmed and powerlessness. It's a vicious cycle, but the only way to break the cycle is to take action, to make the world into what we want to see it as. We have the power. Another world is possible. And I'm going to give you 2 examples. When it was proposed in 2008, the Keystone XL pipeline, which would transport tar sands from Canada to the Gulf Coast, it seemed like it was a done deal. And then NASA scientist Jim Hansen said its construction would be game over for the climate. And soon protesters were being arrested in front of the White House, and attorneys were fighting it in court. And a grassroots movement grew, an unlikely coalition that included climate scientists, indigenous tribes, conservative ranchers, and it elevated that pipeline to a national political issue and brought the project to a halt. I attended a conference sponsored by 350.org in 2010, so 2 years after the pipeline proposal had come forward. And there was such a palpable despair in our gathering that we actually did deep grief work and we sang our way through just to try to maintain our courage. We thought it was a done deal. Fast forward, and recently, President Obama rejected the Keystone XL pipeline. Moreover, this campaign has prevented other companies from moving forward with similar developments because they're afraid of losing money if they would face similar opposition. It can be done. A second example, Tim DeChristopher, a Unitarian Universalist activist, became a hero of the environmental movement after he successfully prevented over 100,000 acres of federal land from being leased for oil and gas drilling. He had originally gone to just protest the auction of land leases, which had been challenged for not adhering to environmental regulations. But in the moment, he decided to join in the bidding, and he outbid all of his competitors, although he had no money to support his bids. And despite the auction being declared later as unlawful and therefore invalid, Tim was arrested for doing this, and he spent 2 years in prison for his act of civil disobedience. At his sentencing, Tim said, "At this point of unimaginable threats on the horizon, this is what hope looks like. In these times of a morally bankrupt government that has sold out its principles, this is what patriotism looks like. With countless lives on the line, this is what love looks like, and it will only grow." Tim's spontaneous act saved not only that land and inspired countless others, but it also transformed him. As he said, "Principled action is the salvation of the soul. I may have had to go to prison, but every day since that auction, I walk a little taller and I feel more free." We need to go forth and take action on multiple fronts and multiple levels. Every single person in this room can make a change today and tomorrow, and so on. Small changes add up, and we can all help to make a difference, living simply so others can simply live. We can provide social service and give direct aid to those most impacted. Environmental racism and classism are realities of our time. We can speak the truth to power through social witness activities, such as marches and pickets and resolutions, and we can take top-down action by organizing and influencing policymakers. We can take bottom-up action through making changes in our own lifestyles by joining environmental groups and by living the adage, think globally, act locally. There are many, many ideas that you can find if you Google it on the web, but I've also made some copies of a document. I have no idea where I came upon this. I can't give the correct citation. It's called 101 Ways to Heal Our Earth. If you're interested, I am happy to hand these out after service. We know that our future is uncertain. The sermon today is titled "Strengthened by Uncertainty," because I love that concept that something that seems like a negative at first, uncertainty, can actually be turned into a great positive. Such times of change can foster imagination and resilience. As Unitarian Universalists, our seventh principle states, we affirm and promote respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. I think this principle needs to be strengthened. Notice we're not just talking about interconnectedness. We move to an understanding of ourselves as interdependent, an interdependent part of the web. And that's good. And I also don't like the word respect. To me, that's way too weak of a word. This is the issue of our day. We need to do more than just respect it. We need to work on it and struggle with our very beings. So by using these 4 steps, centering ourselves in gratitude, honoring the pain for our world, seeing with new eyes, and then going forth, we do have the power and the resources to change our world. At the end of a workshop on living in this time of planetary emergency, one of the leaders present decided to write 5 vows that would carry her forward. And I present them to you as a possibility that they might become your vows also. I vow to myself and to each of you to commit myself daily to the healing of our world and the welfare of all beings, to live on earth more lightly and less violently in the food, products, and energy I consume, to draw strength and guidance from the living earth, the ancestors and the future generations, and my brothers and sisters of all species, to support others in our work for the world and to ask for help when I need it, and finally, to pursue a daily practice that clarifies my mind, strengthens my heart, and supports me in observing these vows. Each of us can make a difference, and each of us is so needed to make a difference. You've heard me say it before, but I'll say it again. Hope is what we hold on to, and hope is a verb with its sleeves rolled up. So let's roll up our sleeves and come together with the strength of our community. And in the words of the ancient Hebrew prophet, let us, in this most vital of issues, choose life so that you and your descendants may live. Amen. Blessed be, and namaste.
It's recipe for success time. Canvas success depends upon each and every one of you signing up for a meal with fellow UUs. And you'll notice right outside is the place to sign up. Preferably, that's the place to sign up. But you probably also noticed that with your acorn came a link so you can sign up electronically and join the rest of the crowd for wonderful meals. This morning, I'd like to pick up where Reverend Tamara left off last Sunday and talk about generosity, the generosity of all of us. Not just the generosity of sharing our time and our talents, but the generosity of pledging our financial support to the wonderful things we experience here at Live Oak. Over the next few weeks, you'll have an opportunity to join your fellow Live Oakers, talk about stewardship, and to sign your pledge cards for the up-and-coming 2016-2017 fiscal year that begins July the 1st. We here at Live Oak are blessed with many great experiences. My favorites, of course, are the wonderful sermons we hear here, especially those of Reverend Tamara. The great music that we hear, thanks to our choir and the leadership and the music produced by John Douglas and his cohorts. The opportunity to really sing those life-transforming hymns like the ones that we've sung today. A grateful and gratifying opportunity to watch our youth as they come up for the Story for All Ages and to watch those youth grow into the UU leaders of our future. A place to celebrate the holidays with our friends. An opportunity to feel good about caring for those who are in need, and in times even in having ourselves cared for when we are in need. A place to participate in Sangha. Those fun walks on the beach, thanks to Liz Zock and her organization, and many really great, social get-togethers. An opportunity to make new friends. And a transforming religious education, adult religious education that we have here at Live Oak. Now, I could go on and on about all of the great things that enrich our experience here at Live Oak, but let me just end by asking each and every one of you to make a pledge, if you haven't already done so, and to increase your pledge so that we can take less money from our endowment fund and we can work a little less hard on fundraising. So let me end by reminding you to sign up after the service, and thank you all for your support in the spirit of the Commonwealth of which we are all a part. Namaste.
These words today are adapted from Václav Havel. We must divest ourselves from our egotistical anthropomorphism, our habit of seeing ourselves as masters of the universe who can do whatever occurs to us. We must discover a new respect for what transcends us, for the universe, for the earth, for nature, for life, for reality. Our respect for other people, for other nations, and for other cultures can only grow from a humble respect for the cosmic order and from an awareness that we are a part of it, that we share in it, and that nothing we do is ever lost, but rather becomes part of the eternal memory of life. May the blessings of love be upon you. May love's peace abide with you, and may love's presence illuminate your heart now and forevermore. Amen. Blessed be. And now, as we extinguish the light of our communal chalice, now is when our service truly begins.